Hey everybody, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 things I learned from my first year as a writing undergrad. First, I'm just going to outline how my program works. I just have to do an intro writing class, and that was basically all that was required of me. So the first lesson that I learned from my first year as a writing undergrad was confidence and how to be confident in my own craft. And I'm going to put a disclaimer here because I am not the most confident human being ever. I actually suffer from crippling self-doubt. A lot of my vlogs, you probably will see it a little bit more, but even then I have to cut out a lot of the self-doubt parts because they get quite boggy. Maybe it's not obvious from these videos, and obviously I'm posting about publications, about things working out for me, but I do have a lot of self-doubt and I often don't film those parts of me going through the crippling self-doubt. So if you don't know, I have a lot of anxiety that definitely plays into how my writing works out for me, and wasn't really something I'd banked on when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, it's gotten a little bit worse. And so my anxiety has sort of hit my writing a little bit, and I definitely feel a lot of doubt in my ability to be a writer and if I'm any good, or if anything I'm writing just sucks, or like if anything is good at all, is there any merit in what I'm writing. But since going to my program, there are and I'm not saying numbers are everything, but getting the grades back for the assignments that I did and getting the feedback, more importantly, from my TAs, from my professors, because I took 2 major writing courses. My other courses weren't writing related, but I took a journalism class, which was an elective, and then my intro writing course. So I didn't have feedback from my professors for my intro writing course, but I did have feedback from my professor for my journalism class. And to be able to speak to my TAs, speak to my professors, and see their reactions to my writing, their feedback, what they like, what they think works, what they don't think works. Because what they don't think works also, to me, gave me confidence, because I was like, okay, I think I know how to revise this to meet what they're expecting. And so just being able to see all of that and be in a program where that's possible has been really great for my confidence. I'm not gonna lie, I entered the program quite confident. I'm gonna say that. Despite the fact that I had high hopes for myself, of course, there was still self-doubt. If there's one thing I walked away with after this first year, it's confidence. And despite the fact that I've made myself seem very non-confident, like I said, I did go into the program feeling confident, and that confidence was reaffirmed as the grades came in, as the feedback came in, as I spoke to my peers and they told me what they thought about my work, because we did some small workshops. It's been really exciting to feel good about myself, and I know I'm a good writer. I still have self-doubt and all of that and stuff, but 2 years ago, I couldn't really sit down and be like, yeah, I'm a really good writer. Now I can. Is everything I create going to be perfect? No. Am I going to hate some of the things I write? Yeah. Is some of the stuff that I'm going to write for my book or for a story, is it all going to suck sometimes? Yeah, but I'm still confident in that I'm a good writer, and I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to start my writing degree, because it's really reaffirmed that for me. And like I said, grades aren't everything, but having the grades, having people who are professionals in the field comment on your work, not only the good things, but like I said, the feedback too, it's a really, really nice feeling. So the second lesson I learned is actually something I wasn't really expecting, and that's how important getting involved in the writing community is. And so I'm not talking about the online writing community. I've been involved in the online writing community since I was in grade 8. I kind of grew up on the online writing community. I started writing when I was 12, and in February of 2015, when I was in grade 8, I decided to start a Tumblr blog, and for a while it was just me. Nobody interacted with my posts, but I started branching out into the writing community, getting to know other people, interacting with other writers, and now I have a following on my blog. So I do have a community digitally, but I'm talking more about the real life community of writers, and this is going to be very specific to where you live. Toronto's a really big city, so it was really hard for me to sort of find a community, and I was also a minor before I started university, and so I didn't really branch out or anything. I've never really had many friends, so it's not like I had that much of a community in real life anyway, despite my friends and my family. So I didn't really get involved as a young teenager in the real life writing scene. To move to an area where writing is a pretty big deal, there's an actual scene there, and I'm sure there's a scene in Toronto and where I live in Toronto. I don't look for it, and I've never known, but now I feel really inspired to go find a community where I live in the multiple cities that I now live, and feel connected to writers, not just digitally, but also in the real world. And For me, the writing scene was a little bit more accessible. There's a writing program and there's writers. And that's also just why I love studying writing, because not only do I get feedback on my work and I get to explore new forms that I never thought to explore, I also get to connect with people. I went to a lot of writing events like readings while I was in university. I've tried my best to stay quite involved, going to club events and just staying involved in the real life writing community. And it's very inspiring. To be surrounded by groups of writers at all times is just a wonderful experience. It's also a very privileged experience. Obviously, not all of us can study writing and go to a city where writing is accessible, so a lot of the times we only have the internet, and I think my digital connections with the writing community were just as important, and they continue to be. If you can, I would definitely recommend finding sort of a real life partnership for your writing. It was really inspiring to me because it made me feel like, oh, yeah, I'm actually a writer. And obviously you don't need a real life community to affirm that for you, but it's just been a wonderful thing. On top of meeting up with people in real life, getting to know people and sharing your work with them is also really important. So I share work with my peers and my classes. I also share work with my writer friends in real life. And so it's been a really fun experience to go to workshops, read my work out loud, sort of just get a little bit more involved in the nitty-gritty details of being a writer in a writing community. And so the third lesson I learned is probably a lesson that like all students learn, so this might just be relevant, and that's how to produce things I don't like and be okay with handing them in anyway. As a writing major, I have deadlines. I didn't have a choice when I had to hand in an assignment, and so if it wasn't working, it wasn't working, and I just had to hand it in. I would try my best sometimes to revise, and it was really difficult for me to be like, I know there are problems with this, I don't like this, I don't want to hand this in and have somebody else read it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I think this sort of connects with the last point. I've always been very involved with the writing community. I have no problems with sharing the digital writing community. I have no problems with sharing my writing online, and I do it all the time. And so at the same time, the writing that I share online is heavily curated. It's what I choose. You can't do that when you're a writing major. I mean, I guess you can, but there's only a certain extent that you can choose, because at the end of the day, it's still my degree and I still have to hand in assignments to get a grade so I can get credits so I can graduate with my bachelor's degree. So learning how to accept that I wasn't gonna adore everything I handed in was really important for me. I was only really proud of one thing I handed in. I handed in 4 assignments because one of our units was cut because of the pandemic. I was really only proud of one thing, and that was my fiction piece. I handed it in knowing I like this is good, and you guys can also be the dictators of whether or not you actually think it was good, because I actually got it published recently. So that's my short story, The Species is Dead, and I handed it in knowing that it was good, that the prose was good, that the characters were kind of funny, that I had experimented with point of view, and I was really happy with that. However, that was not a consistent thing. Every other assignment after fiction, I wasn't really confident in. Either way, I sort of self-doubted again, and this is like kind of contradicting the fact that I said like I learned confidence, but this is what I'm saying. Confidence, you don't just learn to be confident and you're forever confident. I'm a confident writer on a deeper level, but there are still obviously things that come and I'm like, now I'm no longer confident, but those things will come and go. I did struggle to hand in stuff that I didn't like. For example, my creative nonfiction piece, it was about a few days before the deadline, and with my writing assignments, I really like to get them done way in advance so I can have as much time as possible to revise them. But I couldn't revise this piece. I couldn't figure out what to add on to it for the life of me, and I ended up writing stuff that I wasn't super proud of, and I submitted it because there were only a few days left to the deadline, and I was like, well, it's gonna be like that. I am kind of a person who doesn't like doing that. I really like to polish things, but learning to be forced to not have that control was also really important, because by the time I got it back, my TA really liked the piece, and I realized that I have a tendency to overwork things sometimes if I'm not feeling good about them, and if I got feedback from people, they'd be like, it's good, and then they get feedback, but I was still really hypercritical of it, and sometimes I am my own worst critic. Being able to sort of get past things I don't like and handing them in anyway, like my screenplay, which I hated. I got feedback from a few people and it was really helpful. I implemented it to the best of my ability. I still didn't like it. I handed it in anyway. And learning how to do that is really important, because not only was it important for me learning how to work on a deadline, it was also important for me learning how to not be overly critical of myself at all times, because I still did well in all of those assignments because they were assignments at the end of the day, as well as writing practice. I did well on them, and while I didn't like them while I was writing them or by the time I was handing them in, the feedback, it was not nearly as harsh as I had been on myself. And, I still didn't like them by the time I got the feedback. Like, getting a good grade didn't necessarily constitute like, oh, I love this now. It really doesn't to me. It just made me realize that sometimes I'm a bit too hard on myself, and learning to accept that something is just going to be in the state it's in by the time I hand it in, and by the time I get it back, it's probably not nearly as bad as I thought it was. That's really important to me, and that's something I learn with my novels all the time. I'll write a novel and then a year later, and I hate it, I hate every single chapter, and then a year later I'll come back and I'm like, I like this. So the first lesson I learned was how important it is to take risks and do what you want. I took risks for literally every single assignment that I wrote except for screenplay. I didn't like my screenplay, so it just was a blah first year university intro writing course screenplay. My other assignments, however, all took risks in some sort of form. My fiction piece was very unconventional. It was written in first-person collective point of view with no dialogue tags, narrated by 3 children, about an invasive species of a woman named Janice that end up being murdered. Obviously, that's not a very conventional story you'd want to, hand in to your school. I remember when I wrote my first short story ever, I think, actually. I don't really count it because I don't count these things, but it was in grade 9 for English, and I handed in the story about this girl who was friends with this boy, and they would talk to each other through Shakespeare quotes, and it was a very English class because, I thought I want to show what I can do, so let me write a very English classy short story. And maybe that wasn't my full intention, but it's kind of how it turned out. But when I went into my program, I didn't think about, what's going to be best for me to write for this program. It was, what's going to be best for me to write, and that's going to give me the best product for this program. Obviously, following my program's guidelines, we don't write genre fiction in my program. Learning to take risks like that was really important. I wasn't sure if my TA was going to like the idea, if my TA was going to like how I executed the story, the voice, the point of view that I chose, because they're not things I typically would have reached for, but I followed what the story wanted, and that's what the story wanted. I didn't look back because I was like, this is really fucking weird, this story. It is really weird. People probably going to be weirded out when they read it? Yeah. But did people end up liking it? Yeah, they did. Stepping outside of my comfort zone and just pushing myself a little bit to take some risks really paid off in the end. I did this for my other assignments too. My creative nonfiction piece was written in the form of a prescription label, just showing your creativity in different ways that isn't just in the storyline, maybe also in the form and the point of view, just showing your creativity and your craft in different ways, putting your stamp on your stories. And my poem that I wrote for this class, the last thing I wrote, was in the form of a word search, sort of. So sort of just being creative and taking risks with so many different things and so many different genres, because I didn't just limit my risk taking to fiction, I also did it in genres I didn't even know how to write, like creative nonfiction and poetry. And so continuing to take risks and not being afraid. If you have an idea, just follow it. If you have a weird idea, I suggest you write it. We need your weird stories. So if you have them, don't be afraid because they might seem too weird or too unconventional. So the last lesson I learned is that asking for help and feedback is an integral part of my writing process, and I also actually really enjoy it. So there's 2 halves of this. The first half is that, like I said, I have a lot of anxiety, and my anxiety does impact how I write because it makes me self-doubt a lot, which makes me hate everything I write, which makes me self-doubt despite the fact that we confident now. I really needed people to consult while I was writing a lot of these assignments. I didn't just stroll up with this weird story, this weird poem, and then hand it in. I went to my TAs, I asked for help, I talked to my friends, I kept up a conversation as much as I could surrounding my work, just so that I could better understand it if I wasn't feeling too hot about it. Asking for help and getting direction while I was writing was really helpful to me because it allowed me to clarify my personal visions. And when people help you clarify your vision, it's a very special thing because they sort of get your project, and then you also now get your project because they clarify the vision. Because my anxiety does sometimes inhibit the way I write, having people to talk to joke around with, to encourage on both sides was really important for me. And this is why I urge you guys to make a community of people you trust. I think on the internet is important, but even more so off the internet, if you can find any writer friends, I would highly recommend asking for feedback from people, giving your work to people, asking for help whenever you need it. I think a lot of us treat writing as a very solitary thing. I myself, and there are many instances where, writing should be a solitary thing. I think with the age of sort of digital writing, now there's like a lot of ease of access for information. And so I think a lot of people can become a little bit dependent on that. However, asking for help isn't inherently wrong. And so if you think that you need help with something, don't be afraid to ask your writer buddy or your critique partner. Learning to love feedback was really, really important for me. I'm not gonna lie, every single time I got feedback from people, and sometimes I do this still now, and I probably will continue to do it, I would get feedback from my TA and I wouldn't look at it for like 2 weeks. It just made me so anxious. I just didn't want to look at it. Getting feedback is scary, but when I would read it, it would clarify something in my mind, and I would know, not always perfectly, not always in the best way, but I would know at some part of me which way I needed to go, what I needed to do. And sometimes I struggled to implement feedback, but the feedback was still important in sort of the process of writing. I drafted, and then I got feedback, and then I revised, and learning to do that like 4 times for my assignments has become sort of one of my favorite parts. Hearing people's thoughts, and even if they're negative thoughts, even if they're positive thoughts, I like to hear people's thoughts about my work. I think it also allowed me to create a bit more of a hands-on experience with my degree, because I could have not talk to anybody in my writing degree. And I also think I'm privileged because I have a twin sister who's in the same program, who I can talk to all the time. However, a lot of people don't have that. But having people to talk to beyond Sarah, like my professors, like my TAs, it was really nice just to be able to keep up a dialogue about feedback. And I know this video wasn't super craft related. That's because I, to be honest, didn't really learn that much about craft. That sounds kind of cocky. I don't mean it that way. It's just an introductory writing class, and I learned a lot of it before I went to university through a lot of practice, because I was practicing writing the genre that I knew I was going to study for a few years by that point, and reading that genre. There my earring goes, so I'm just going to take off the other one. It was just more these bigger lessons. These are a few lessons. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's been really difficult for me to film video while I'm at home, and that's because I have a lot of people living with me, and so it's very rare that I can have a pocket of time. So I'm gonna try to keep uploads as much as possible, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it made sense. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to study writing. I feel really grateful to be able to study the thing that I love, and I'm really grateful to my parents and to my family for being supportive of that. That's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, y'all can always leave them down there, and I also have a Tumblr ask box, but for now I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.